Well, Happy New Year, vinyl community. It is time for the annual Vinyl Tag with 20 questions for the year 2020. And the first question on the list is Best Find of 2019. That's easy. That was finding this original edition of Ascension by John Coltrane, the first edition with the alternate take that was replaced by the more familiar take on all subsequent pressings. And that was a big, big deal when I found it. So, super happy to get that in the collection. The second question is favorite new album of 2019. I really don't have a lot to choose from. I didn't get a lot of new releases this year. So, point out one by Surplus 1980, featuring my friend Mo Stiano, Pigeon Obstacle Course. This is a new release with the LP on purple and green colored vinyl, sort of, I think, representing the colors of the sheen of a pigeon's neck. And also includes a bonus 45. This is avant-garde rock, kind of combination of post-punk, post-rock, I should say, punk, avant-garde. They even do a treatment of a John Cage composition on there. And another one that came out this year with some folks I know a bit, though not in person, sadly. Perhaps hope to meet them someday if they visit the USA. This is Précis Amant by Pascal Vaucel and Carla Di Ratz. Very cool album. The third question is a novelty recording. So I will show the Beatles Songs album that came out in 1982. This is the original cover that was replaced after people complained about the cover artist, William Stout, making one of the fans at this Beatle convention cartoon look like Mark David Chapman. This contains novelty songs about the Beatles, one of the drop-in records or cut-in records by Buchanan and Greenfield, The Invasion. And the second track is Hold My Hand by the Ruddles, featuring the very sorely missed Neil Innes, who just passed away 2 days ago. We Love You Beatles by the Carefrees, My Boyfriend Got a Beatle Haircut by Donna Lynn, Letter from Elena by Casey Kasem, Beatlemania by Jack Nitzsche, Beatle Rap by the Quarrymen. That was, I think, something specially recorded for this album. This otherwise is a collection of old singles and miscellaneous tracks. Peter Cook and Dudley Moore, L.S. Bumblebee, a track that actually found its way onto some Beatles bootlegs. Wildman Fisher, I'm the Meanie, Alan Sherman, Pop Hates the Beatles, The Four Preps, Letter to the Beatles, and Gary Usher, The Beatle. After the complaints about the original cover, it was replaced with this image on the front. And staying in a Beatle vein, the next question is an Homage cover. And I don't think any band has had more homage or parody covers than the Beatles. So this is We're Only in It for the Money by Frank Zappa and the Mothers of Invention, which obviously is an homage parody to the Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band album, which, along with Abbey Road, is easily one of the most parodied covers in the whole discography of rock music. This is the original version, which is essentially inside out. There was a problem with the Beatles not being too crazy about this cover, so they didn't want the Sgt. Pepper front cover to show in the racks when the album was sold. And here's a reissue where it was actually printed the expected way around, with the yellow photo of the band on the inner spread. And of course, This does come with the parody of the Sgt. Pepper cutout insert as well. Okay, fifth question is show a B-side or deep cut. So I will show a B-side. This is 1977 single by Bryan Ferry. This is taken from his album In Your Mind, the A-side being This Is Tomorrow. But the B-side is As the World Turns. Great track, not released on any of Bryan Ferry's albums. And he is accompanied on this track by Robert Fripp and Eddie Jobson. Eddie Jobson also co-wrote the song. You know, since the first two Roxy Music albums, Roxy Music's subsequent albums gradually grew less and less weird. Until by Siren, the last album before they temporarily broke up, the weirdness factor had pretty much disappeared. And this album, In Your Mind, was Bryan Ferry's first album of original material, having previously done albums of cover versions during Roxy Music's activity. So it kind of followed in that trajectory. There was really no weirdness at all on the album. It was very straightforward, a bit more lighthearted than the Roxy Music albums. And so this B-side, this is where the weirdness went. That's where it went. Sixth question is show something funky. And I would like to show some Parliament, like Motor Booty Affair or clones of Dr. Funkenstein, because those are just so sweet. But those are not on vinyl in my collection. I have all that stuff on CD. So I'm going to go in a somewhat different direction and pick On the Corner by Miles Davis, because this is some truly deep funk. This is a reissue copy from Music on Vinyl. The copy that I had back in the day was not a gatefold. This does have the gatefold with the extra cartoons inside. The Columbia issue I had back in the 70s or 80s was just a plain cover. And I always really loved this Corky McCoy artwork, he having done several covers for Miles Davis during the 70s. The next question is odd shelf pair, albums that are neighbors in your record collection that are perhaps incongruous. So I selected as the first of the pair Zeit wird knapp, or Time Grows Short, or Time is Running Out, by Heiner Goebbels and Alfred Hart. And this is musical settings of the words by Bertolt Brecht, the great German poet and songwriter who is associated with the Weimar Republic era, and when the Nazis came to power, he fled the country. And so ironically, this is setting by a person named Goebbels. I don't know if he has no balls at all. That's a different song. That's not on here. And this also features vocals by Dagmar Krause, known for Henry Cow, of course, and recitation by Ernst Stützner. The leaders are Heiner Goebbels, mostly on keyboards, and Alfred Hart on saxophones and other woodwinds. And as you might guess from the cover, this is very intense and dark interpretations of very intense and dark words of Bertolt Brecht. And on the shelf, it sits right next to The Go-Go's, Beauty and the Beat, which is not an album that the words dark and intense were made for. Okay, next question is I Was There, or a band I've seen. I've been waiting for this one. December of 1969, I got my dad to take me to see the Iron Butterfly from San Diego. This was at the San Diego Sports Arena, and Iron Butterfly was based in San Diego. So they were hometown heroes. And when we went to see them, they announced from the stage, we're recording a live album tonight. And apparently that was the last performance by the classic four-piece band or classic four-piece lineup that recorded In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida. So a few months after that concert, this is what appeared on the shelves. Iron Butterfly Live. And there is an announcement on the album. It's great to be back in San Diego. Just so you know, it's from that show. So I was there. The next question is an album that I have as a reissue and wish I had an original. And I could go on all day about that. There are many, many. But I'm going to show a couple of albums that were among the first jazz albums I ever owned. And I no longer have those old copies, and even those weren't true originals. So I'd really love to have, because these are both among my favorite jazz albums of all time. It's no coincidence that they were among the first that I chose when I was first getting into jazz. And one of them sort of partners with the Miles Davis album I just showed, because I'm really lacking in the Miles Davis department. This is my favorite, In a Silent Way. All-time favorite Miles. This was the first one that I got. And I just don't have any of Miles' Columbia period in original pressings. And that's my favorite period of Miles. I'm pretty well set on the Prestige era, which I have a lot of reissues, but I'm not really concerned about getting that stuff as original pressings, whereas the Columbia stuff is the stuff I really love. And I have very few of those on vinyl to begin with, and they're all reissues. That On the Corner was a music on vinyl pressing. This is a Columbia Legacy pressing. I don't know what year, but it's quite recent. And the other I'll show is, again, one of my favorite albums of all time, as In a Silent Way, is Eric Dolphy, Out to Lunch. It's just a magnificent album. Freddie Hubbard, Eric Dolphy, Bobby Hutcherson, Richard Davis, and Tony Williams. Mind blower. This is the Blue Note 75 reissue. The copy that I had back in the 70s, I believe, was a Blue Label copy. It did have the Blue Note inner sleeve with the musical notes. I don't remember whether it had the white or the black B logo on the dark blue label, but I'm sure it was the dark blue label pressing, this being in the mid-70s, probably 75, possibly 74. Okay, next question is, show somebody whose complete discography you collect. And I was initially going to go with Frank Zappa, because I do have a huge Frank Zappa collection. But I'm doing Zappa for a couple of things here. And I did, though, just want to bring up a funny situation. I do have a huge Zappa collection. I basically have everything. But a couple of years ago, the Zappa Family Trust released this bizarre item. This is the Halloween 1977 concerts, and it's packaged with a Halloween costume, a Frank Zappa mask and a little sort of plastic bag with a Frank Zappa torso on it that you can wear as a costume. It's a pretty silly idea, but it was funny. It's just that it's a real waste of shelf space, particularly given that the music itself is not on vinyl, not on a CD, but on a thumb drive shaped like a candy bar. So it's like 6 or 7 concerts and the music is all on this, but it takes up a big amount of shelf space. So this past year, they did it again. They packaged another Halloween mask item. This time they did put the music on CDs. It wasn't so many concerts, so it fit on 5 CDs. And the box, I believe, was even bigger because they packaged it with a mask and with gloves. Instead of Frank Zappa's normal face, it was Frank Zappa as Frankenstein. So you got a green Frank Zappa mask with like rotting flesh and maggots in the mustache and green monster hands that you can wear. And I just thought, do they think we're 10 years old? Do they really think that we have unlimited shelf space for this silliness? So that was the first Frank Zappa release ever that I do not have in physical form. I did download all the music, and I did purchase the single CD of highlights. And it's really great. It's great stuff, but I just can't justify. So, sorry, that's a long tangent. For an artist that I'm a completist about, I wanted to get some classical music in here. So I'm going to bring up Gustav Mahler. Obviously, I don't collect every Mahler recording, but I have recordings of all of Mahler's works, and I'm interested when somebody comes up with an interesting variation on the oeuvre of Mahler. And I'll show 3 records that have something interesting about them besides being just a recording from Mahler's core catalog of works. First is this Columbia recording of Mahler's song cycle Des Knaben Wunderhorn. And this has Christa Ludwig and Walter Berry alternating as the vocalists. And they are accompanied by the New York Philharmonic Orchestra, conducted by Leonard Bernstein. And what's interesting about this edition, with the texts on the inside, is that it features a bonus LP. It's actually billed as a 12-inch bonus LP on the cover, with all the same songs performed live without the orchestra, with Bernstein playing piano to accompany the vocalists. The next is my favorite of all of Mahler's compositions, Das Lied von der Erde, the Song of the Earth. And that is usually performed by an orchestra with an alto singer and a tenor singer who alternate the male and female vocals. This takes the option that Mahler did give of replacing the alto with a baritone voice, but that is seldom heard, so this is an unusual version with baritone and tenor singing rather than alto and tenor. The baritone is Dietrich Fischer-Dieskau, tenor is Murray Dickey, and the orchestra is the Philharmonia Orchestra, conducted by Paul Kletzky. And finally, this is the 3rd Symphony of Mahler, and what's unusual about this recording, London Symphony Orchestra, conducted by Rudolf Schwartz on the Everest label, is that they squeezed this very long symphony onto one LP. So side 1 of the LP is the first 2 movements, 13:50 and 14 minutes, adding up to 27 minutes 50 seconds. Side 2, with the remaining 3 movements, 18:15, 7:30, and 16:50, adding up to over 42 minutes on one LP side. Okay, the next question is, show a unique label. Flo and Eddie, Mark Volman and Howard Kalin, formerly of the Turtles and the Mothers of Invention, used to have a column in the 70s in one of the local Southern California music papers, Blind Date with Flo and Eddie, where they would be played various new releases and they would make snarky comments about them. And for this one record, this was in 1976, they saw the record and said, oh, a custom label, it must be one of the guys from Yes. It is one of the guys from Yes. Okay, put that in the column. We guessed the record before we heard any of it. And so what I'm showing is the solo album by Alan White, Ramshackled. Bill at the Vinylverse just showed this record. I guess he just got a copy. There's my cutout, Bill. This came out in 1976, as I mentioned, when all the members of Yes released solo albums while the band itself was on a recording hiatus, although they were still touring. And here is the label, which is artwork by Henry S. Hodgson. I'm not sure how well it's coming through. I think that's in focus. You can see that it's one of those eye-fooling pictures with the nude ladies forming the head of a man. And the next question is, show a recording featuring somebody before he or she was famous. So I'm going to show some singles from 1963. This is Grunion Run by the Persuaders, 1963 on the original Sound label. Also on the original Sound label, Mr. Clean by Mr. Clean, with the B-side Jessie Lee. And once again on original Sound, The Penguins featuring Cleve Duncan and Memories of El Monte. Finally, on the Capitol label, this is a reissue of The Big Surfer. This is from 1963. You can date it a little bit because it's a John F. Kennedy parody. And it was originally released privately on the Viga label, and then Capitol picked it up and reissued it themselves. But Brian Lord and the Midnighters. What these four records have in common is that they all feature songwriting, and some of them feature guitar work also by Frank Zappa, before he had made a record on his own. The next question is a musical book or movie. So I'll show one of each. For the book, I'll show The Bear Comes Home by Rafi Zabor. This book was originally serialized in the magazine Musician, Player, and Listener, and it is about a jazz saxophone player who happens to be a bear. And that doesn't sound like the most promising premise, but it's a really great book. If you flip through it, you may notice it includes some written music. There is some discussion of harmonization, jazz theory, jazz chords. And if you're not a musician, do not be intimidated by that. You do not need to be a musician to enjoy this book. But there is some stuff like that in there for the people who enjoy it. But it's a really, really good read. And for the movie, I chose one of my favorites, I'm Not There. 6 actors, including one actress, Kate Blanchett, playing different aspects of Bob Dylan. Extraordinary piece of filmmaking. And Kate Blanchett's turn is one of my favorite parts of the film, as it also includes a representation of the Beatles, who are portrayed as a sort of tumbleweed or whirlwind of flailing arms and legs that just sort of blur across the screen frantically. Next question is somebody underrated. And I'll resist the temptation to say me. I'm underrated. I don't see people mentioning Lena Lovitch much. Lena Lovitch was pretty big in the new wave era, the early 80s. This is her first album, Stateless. This is the UK cover. It came out in the US with a different cover and different mix. She's still going, still playing live, but she doesn't doesn't get over to these shores much at all, I think. Not as well remembered as she should be, because she's just one of the great new wave pop artists. And I just really love her songs. The next question, batting average. Somebody whose whole discography is just great. So I chose King Crimson. I'm not disappointed by any King Crimson album. I think they're all fantastic. This, of course, is the 1973 release, Lark's Tongues in Aspic. The U.S. Atlantic edition. Next question, different cover. Okay. Chose Gentle Giant. This is the original cover of their fourth album, Octopus. It's a gatefold Roger Dean artwork showing a very luridly red octopus and some of Dean's interesting marbling that he experimented with in a lot of his work. Lyrics on the inside. And this is on Vertigo. This is not a swirl copy. This is the Spaceship label. So that is how the album was released in the band's native England, but in the USA it was released in this die-cut cover, and you can see that the blue inner sleeve shows through where the jar is die-cut. I didn't want to take this out of the plastic sleeve, so I'm trying to tilt it to keep out the glare. So completely different cover concept. And I'm really not sure why they went with this, but they did. Lyrics on that blue inner sleeve, since this version is not gatefold. And I happen to be drinking my tea today from a Gentle Giant mug featuring that Roger Dean image. Okay, next album that you got cheap that is worth money, worth big bucks. And I'm not sure what I paid for this when I bought it. I bought it in the 90s. This is Achim Reichel Echo. And I didn't check what year this came out originally. This is from the 70s. Interesting electronica sort of thing from the 70s. And I don't remember, as I said, how much I paid, but it would have been in the neighborhood of $20, give or take a $5. And on Discogs, it looks like it's going for, there are a few copies for sale, and the cheapest one is $500. It does say that the average price that it's sold at is $400, but that may include some older, cheaper sales. So this one seems to be bringing in the bucks these days, but sorry, mine is not for sale. The next question is a favorite drummer. I already showed an album with Tony Williams on it, Eric Dolphy Out to Lunch, so I'm going to show Jack DeJohnette. I chose, instead of a Jack DeJohnette album, the Gateway album by John Abercrombie with DeJohnette and Dave Holland, just because this is one of my favorite album covers of all time. And it is an album that just really makes me feel good when I hear the really simple but just perfect drumming of Jack DeJohnette on Backwoods Song. It just is such a relaxed feel that swings like mad with very little effort behind it. He just has the touch that is beautiful. An album turning 20 this year. That's hard because I don't have any vinyl to show. I can't think of a single album I have on vinyl that was originally released in the year 2000. So I'm going to show my favorite album from that year, which was not released on vinyl, CD only, Dancing by Mike Keneally. Great, great album. This is not my original copy from that year. This is the reissue signed by Mike with a second disc and a limited edition number. The second disc being live material, live and acoustic at the Baked Potato, Dancing with Myself. And finally, a trilogy. That could have been King Crimson, because I showed the start of their Bruford and Wetton trilogy, or I could have showed the red, blue, and yellow trilogy of Discipline, Beat, and Three of a Perfect Pair. But instead, I'm going with Gong, who incidentally could have gone in the Strange Neighbors, because they're the band on the other side of the Go-Go's. But this is the Flying Teapot trilogy by Gong, their absolute peak material, starting with Flying Teapot. This is an original UK Virgin pressing. And the second part of the trilogy, Angel's Egg. Gatefold Virgin copy, but did not come with a booklet, which I understand was in some copies. And the conclusion, You. And this copy is autographed by David Allen and Tim Blake. So that's it for Vinyl Tag. Thank you very much for making it through this, and wish you all a very happy new year. I hope wonderful things happen to you. I hope wonderful things happen to me. I hope wonderful things happen to the whole world. So be well. Talk with you again soon. Bye-bye for now.